4, 3, 2, 1.
The pandemic has been a setback for millions and millions of Americans. We're going to talk about overcoming obstacles on the Jeff Crilley Show with a young lady who knows a little something about that. She overcame a rare nerve disease. That's next.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show. It seems like all of us had to figure out a way to pivot during this pandemic, but my next guest, Jennifer Loehding, she's with the Starz Girlz podcast. You had to pivot a couple of years ago when you had a rare nerve condition. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So 8 years ago, I walked into the dentist and 5 months later was diagnosed with a rare nerve condition called trigeminal neuralgia. It actually affects the left side of my face, and so after battling with that for about 4 years in and out of the hospital, the doctors, I decided that I was going to make a pivot. I kind of came to a cross point where it was a situation where I had to figure something out. I knew I couldn't go on living the way that I was living, and so I made a switch and went on a holistic journey to heal myself, and was able, after working on that for about 22 months, 24 months, was able to get off all my meds and put the nerve pain into remission.
Wow. What? And you told me off camera, it's one of those conditions where it's the worst toothache ever. You don't even feel like getting out of bed.
Yes, it's awful. They actually, if you were to go onto the internet right now and look it up, it would be labeled a suicide disease. It's extremely painful. It's one of those things, I used to describe it to people. You go in the doctors and they would say on a scale of 10, 1 to 10, where are you? I'm 100, because it was so bad. I would tell people my head just felt like it was in this vice grip. And so, yeah, it's not something that is easily treatable, and so when you get in a situation like that, they resort to giving you medication. And so that's what I ended up doing for for better part of 4 years, until I decided to make a change and get off of that.
And keto was a big thing for you.
Absolutely, yes. And I tell people that wasn't an overnight thing, because at the time that I was doing keto, it really wasn't well known out in the public. And so I remember doing that and people being very, that's not going to be healthy, that's not going to be good for you, but I really didn't see a choice. I couldn't live the way I was living, and so I went on full throttle, counting macros, never cheated a day.
Wow. And
was able, after that period of time, to successfully get off all my meds and put the nerve pain into remission.
And run a marathon, is that right?
I did, yes. So I was active before I was afflicted with this condition, but during that time, I always tell people we all have vices, right? We all find vices when we go through pain. And so during the time that I was doing this, I took up running heavily. And the way I described it, in my book and to people, was that for the time that I was running, whether it be 30 minutes or 5 hours, the pain was directed in a different place. And so it would allow me to get free from that, put it into my feet for a while, or my knees.
Yes. Well, let's. We're going to show a little video that you put up a number of tips on YouTube, and I recommend everybody follow her on YouTube and your social media platforms, because you're always giving these wonderful, heartfelt lessons from your life and your experiences. Tell us why you do it.
I feel compelled to share the message. Having gone through that, I didn't have anybody at that time that I knew was going through this condition, but I had incredible mentors. I have been very blessed in the industry that I'm in to have had mentors for the last 20 years. And so I know the importance of that. And when you're going through some kind of a crisis, it's very easy to get lost. And so for me, it's really about just sharing my message, putting it out there to people that, hey, if you want to get through something, you can. You just got to work at it and keep fighting the fight, and you can get through it.
Wow. You also have a top-rated podcast. Tell us about Starz Girlz. How'd you come up with the name, and what's the podcast about?
I love Starz Girlz. So Starz Girlz, at the time that this came about, I had a co-host with me, and we were sitting in a parking lot after a networking event, and we were really just kind of complaining about where we were. And so it was just a crazy story. We just came up with this name, and we wanted to have something that would be powerful and say, our whole tagline is, whether you're starting a business, a project, a movement, or a brand, we're here to talk about it. And so It's all about rocking your scene, whatever you're doing. And so for me, it's really just a way to help people see that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they make extraordinary decisions.
That's awesome. And this is one that hasn't even been published yet. Is that right?
Yes. It's going out actually today.
Very cool.
Right. Yes.
And tell us about this guest.
Okay, so this is Jill Rosenzweig. She is an amazing woman, a civil litigator. She just wrote a book called Bailey Bloom and the Battle of the Bug. And so her book was about the COVID pandemic that we're going through right now. And her message that she was sharing was how we could, by doing happy things, we could boost our immune system and actually help ourselves be better. And so she wrote this children's book, did it in like a day, and of course had to do edits and all that, but wrote it in a day. And so this particular scene here, I was asking her, what does success look like in your eyes? And what was so neat is she said, when you listen to this, she says, success to me is being proud of something that you're doing. And so incredible guest, and I just had such an amazing time chatting with her. I love all my guests that come on the show. I love them all.
Well, now I want to talk about your book, because I love your title. We're going to put that up on the screen. Tell us about how you came up with the title.
So Be the Toughest Obstacles is really, there was no surprise to this. It was really, for me, just about beating the toughest obstacle, because for me, I had, before that condition, other than having migraines, I had never really gone through anything that was traumatic. And this particular time that I had gone through this situation, it was probably one of the most traumatic things I had ever gone through. It not only affected me personally, but professionally. I had to step down from a leadership position. It affected my family, my children. And so the book is really a memoir of my journey. It tells the story, what I went through, but not only that, it tells everything that I learned going through that process, how I healed, how I recovered. And the great thing is the chapter 7, that's really a sum up of where I am now. It's everything that led me to where I am, and that just great silver lining to the whole story.
So as you look back on your life and you ask God, why did this happen to me? Did you think it happened to you so that you could help heal others?
Absolutely. Interestingly, 8 years ago, I don't know if it was quite 8 years ago, but I was sitting in a holistic practitioner's office, and I remember him asking me, Jennifer, what was going on in your life at the time that this happened? And I remember being so angry when he asked me that question. In hindsight, I wrote about this in the book 8 years later, that at that time there was so much going on in my life. We were living in the fast food lane. My kids were in multiple activities. They were 16, 12, and 8 at the time. And we were just living a really hectic life. And having come through all that, I really feel like, I don't wish that on anybody, but I think that there were some definite lessons, and it gave me the voice I needed to be able to create change in people. And that's where I'm good, is helping people make change.
Wow, that's very powerful. Well, I want you to look into your camera. I think that's your camera right there. Give some encouragement to the audience, because I think that a lot of people are going through some depression issues, they're struggling, maybe they're out of work. What would you like to say to close out the segment?
I would say, to hang tight to your faith, but more importantly, surround yourself with the right people. Get in the space of some incredible mentors, coaches, whomever you need to put in your space, and continue to pour positive material in your headspace, because I think with all the negativity that's going on right now, it's so easy to get consumed in that. But I've always say fear and anxiety cannot reside in the same place as gratitude and happiness. So if you're pouring in the positive stuff, the other's going to leave.
That's very cool. We're going to end with your website. JenniferLoehding.com is her website, and make sure you tune into her podcast and get her book and hire her to coach your team. Thank you so much, Jennifer. You've been amazing.
Thank you.
You bet. And that's it for now. We'll see you next time.